Done this in a while, but we're going to take a little family time, if that's okay, just real quick. And family time is just an opportunity for us at the front end of a service to kind of talk about family business, just stuff that's going on in the heart and the soul of our church. And so we want to take the next week or two and recap a little bit our Vision Sunday, which was last week. Vision Sunday was wonderful. It was a long service, and the people that endured with us, they got marathon stickers on the back of their car because they endured the marathon that was Vision Sunday. But we are going to recap that just a little bit if you missed it. And so today, just real simply, we want to introduce, if you didn't hear it, if you weren't here last week, our new vision statement for the church. And we feel like it's something that God breathed into our hearts. It really resonated with us. And so this is what it is. And I think we'll have a slide up there. Our vision is to grow together as a gospel community, both living and sharing faith, hope, and love. Faith, hope, and love. 1 Corinthians 13 says these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. And so to live it, to share it, both. And so to live faith, hope, and love, the Bible says that we live, the righteous live by faith. We live by faith. We live in hope. The book of Acts says that I will dwell in hope. And so to live there, to live in hope, and also to live from love. Let everything you do be done in love, from a place of love. 1 Corinthians 13 says, it talks about all these great things. You can do all these impressive things, but if it's not done from a place of love, then it doesn't really matter. And so we want to live there. We want to live by faith. We want to live in hope. We want to live from love. And also, we want to share it. And I think a lot of people ask the question of themselves, of the people around them, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? I think in large part, we are here as believers to bring hope to humanity, the hope of humanity that is Christ. And I think we also are meant to inspire others by our faith. I think it's pretty common that we stop sharing at some point in our lives as much as we used to. We're taught to share as kids. We're congratulated on sharing with our siblings, with our friends. And then at some point along the way, I don't know, we don't really value sharing as much. And so as far as faith is concerned, go get your own. And whatever you got, it's fine. And then we kind of turn into this little siloed, individualistic category of people. And that's not what the Bible proclaims. That's cultural. That's not the gospel. The gospel is to go in the world. The Great Commission is to go share. Share what I've given you. Share what I've done for you. Share the goodness that I've placed within you. And so we're meant to be sharers. This little light of mine. Come on, everybody. I'm going to let it shine. Just the girls. You guys didn't roll with me in that. Worst choir director ever. This is something that we're meant to share. Even the Bible says that He puts us on a hilltop to shine, to radiate the goodness of God. And so we're meant to share. And love is the most important thing. These three things remain. The greatest of these is love. Some might say, why is love the greatest? Well, love's eternal. Once we get to heaven, we don't need faith anymore. We don't need hope anymore. That has a shelf life. We need it desperately now, but once we go home to be with Jesus, faith and hope are not essential. But what is and what is eternal, what is forever, is love. God is love. That's what we're called to bring to the table at all cost. That is people we agree with, people we disagree with. That is people that are easy to get along with. That's people that might be a little bit high maintenance, if you know what I'm saying. It is loving everyone, including our enemies, but to be beacons of love, to share it. And so this is our calling card as a church. We're called to grow as a gospel community, the gospel being the message, the good news of Jesus that brings us together. It is the message. There is no other message. It builds us, it expands us, it fuels us. It is what drives us is the gospel, to go and to be who Jesus has called us to be to this beautiful, amazing city, and that is bringers. I love the phrase hope dealers. We are hope dealers. We are love bringers. We are faith encouragers. We are ones that bring those things to the table. So that's our vision. You guys dig it? You can kind of summarize, I love this, you can summarize our vision in 4 words, and here it is: faith, hope, love, family. That's us. And so if anybody asks you, what's a family church about? Just say, well, the guy wears weird shirts that he bought used off eBay for $8, but also we are all about faith, hope, love, and family. Is that good? All right. You guys ready for a message? Oh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm about to lose control, and I think I like it. Last week, we wrapped up a 37-week series. Today, we begin a brand new series through 4 chapters of the book of Jonah, which should only take 7 weeks. Thank you, Jesus. Today will serve as a bit of an overview and introduction to our series, and this will kind of set the table. And I want to start it by reading from the Jesus Storybook Bible. And so if you guys want to get on a carpet square, sit crisscross applesauce, here it is. This is the Bible that I'm reading from today. I'm not going to read all the story, but I just love how it begins, and I think this will be a good kickoff for the Message translation. This is written by a young lady by the name of Sally Lloyd-Jones. It is brilliant. If you have children, come see me. I will get you one. And so we need to have these. They're wonderful. This is what it says. It's titled God's Messenger. God had a job for Jonah, but Jonah did not want it. Go to Nineveh, God said, and tell your worst enemies that I love them. No, said Jonah. Those are bad people doing bad things. And God said, exactly. They have run far away from me, but I can't stop loving them. I will give them a new start, and I will forgive them. No, said Jonah. They don't deserve it. I'll run away, Jonah said to himself, far away, so far away that God won't be able to find me. Then I won't have to do what God says. It's a good plan, he said, because as far as he knew, it was a good plan. But, of course, it wasn't a good plan at all. It was a silly plan because you can't run away from God. He will always come and find you. Jonah went ahead with his not very good plan. 1 ticket to not Nineveh, please, he said, and boarded a boat sailing in the very opposite direction of Nineveh. I love how it's written. The whole story is just brilliant, how it's written in the Jesus Storybook Bible. I love it. And the reason I wanted to read from that, start from there, is for 2 reasons. First of all, it's fun and it's great. But 2, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the story of Jonah gets categorized in our minds and in kind of common belief and interpretation as kind of a kid's story, a tall tale, if you will. Do you remember the boards that you used to, remember the boards you used to put the people up on? Flannel boards, there it is, flannel boards. I used to go into the kids ministry and play with the flannel boards and have Jesus like kicking everybody in the face, and then I'd have the whale come in and eat everybody up, and so there's Jonah in the belly. It feels like a moral allegory is kind of how it reads. We read the story and we're like, it's a little far-fetched, it's a little kind of kooky, and it reads like a moral allegory. So is it allegorical? Well, we'll get there. But one of the things about a typical moral allegory or a fable or a tall tale, typically it has a happy ending. And the hero of the story is usually redeemed and is somewhat heroic. In this story, however, not to spoil the ending of it, the hero of the story is anything but heroic. And the ending is it's not a happily ever after. In fact, that's one of the reasons I love this story so much, is because it is one of the most honest, real endings of a story ever. It makes sense. It connects. I love that. There's something in me that loves realistic endings to movies. One of my favorite movies ever is called Roman Holiday. Do you guys know that one? Audrey Hepburn and Gregory Peck. And she's a princess incognito, goes out for a day in Rome, and she meets this guy who figures out she's a princess, but she doesn't want to tell him. The end of the movie, you expect them to come together and live happily ever after, but the movie ends with him seeing her from afar, and it's basically the guy doesn't get the girl, and it's over. I love that. It's great. Sonia hated it. I thought it was wonderful, and so I love that, and I think that's kind of why I like this story. It's just honest, it's realistic, that's life. Life has a lot of disappointment, and life is not always a Hallmark movie. Sorry, Sonia, it just isn't. So we'll get to the is an allegory thing in a minute, but a little background on the person Jonah. Who is this guy? He's mentioned in another place. So he gets his own book, which is great, which is only 4 chapters, which, sorry. But he is mentioned in the book of 2 Kings in chapter 14, where we kind of get a little backstory. And we learn that he's from the Galilean region called, a place called Gath-Hepher. And it sounds like I just called you a name. I didn't. I didn't call you Gath-Hepher. It is a place and just a couple of miles north of Nazareth. Like 6-7 miles. So he's basically from a place very close to where Jesus would have called his hometown. And so he was a prophet. God called him to prophesy. And he prophesied specifically, as a lot of prophets did, to authority, to leadership, to a king. And he was a prophet who prophesied to a king called Jeroboam II. Jero, Jero, Boam, Boam, the second. And he was a miserable king. He was not good, not a good leader. But nonetheless, Jonah was a prophet to him. And this king ruled over the northern part of Israel. At that stage, Israel was kind of the north and the south. So you had the northern part, which would be Israel. They had the southern part, which would be called Judah. And so he ruled over the northern part of Israel from about 782 to 753 BC is the time frame that we're looking at. And Jonah gets his own book of the Bible. And this book, the book of Jonah, if you haven't found it in your Bible yet, it sits right between Obadiah and Micah. You know where they are. And so you know exactly where that is. And so it is considered, and it would be classified as a prophetic book, one of the prophetic books of the Bible. However, it is unlike pretty much any other prophetic book in the fact that it's not really centered on the prophecies of God speaking through a prophet. It's really centered around the prophet's response to God speaking to the prophet. So it really encapsulates Jonah's response and ultimately complete and total disobedience to God speaking directly to the prophet. So it's more about his response than it is the words that God speaks as you read it. And so 8 books later, we'll get to the allegory thing here. 8 books later, the New Testament begins. So if you want to find the book of Jonah and puppy ear that one, we'll be in it for at least 7 weeks. So if you go forward 8 books, you'll find the book of Matthew. That's where the New Testament starts. Obviously, it is the arrival of the hero of the entire Bible, and that is Jesus. And so we see Jesus' arrival. We see the beginning of his ministry. And I think it needs to be said, and it can't be said enough, how controversial Jesus was as a person. He was, now we kind of have this nicety version of Jesus action figures and Jesus, kind of pictures. And we have this a more palatable and accessible idea of Jesus. At that stage, when he first arrived, there was never a more polarizing figure. And so he's a guy walking around claiming to be the Son of God. That will split a crowd in half pretty quickly. Not to mention, he said, "Hey, you guys want to follow me? You need to eat my flesh and drink my blood." Okay, Dracula, thanks. So he is a polarizing figure. And so that person, the person who was completely polarizing and controversial, he would be questioned often, as you can imagine. Prove your deity, prove your divinity, prove who you say you are. Twice in the book of Matthew, Jesus responded this way, and it's almost exactly the same way. I'll read one of the instances. Matthew 12, verse 39. An evil and adulterous generation craves for a sign, and yet no sign will be given to it but the sign of Jonah the prophet. The same phrase happens again a couple chapters later, Matthew 16, verse 4, I believe. He says the same thing. So as an answer to I need a sign. I need to know that you are who you say you are. He says the sign of Jonah. That's what we need to focus on. He's talking about Jonah as not an allegory, but in historical reference. He's talking about Jonah as a historical reference to something that actually happened. So Jesus refers to this idea of the sign of Jonah. And in Luke 11:30, we get this idea. Just as Jonah became a sign to the Ninevites, so the Son of Man will be to this generation. He's saying that the story of Jonah that you're familiar with, the historical reference that I'm making is meant to point you directly to who I am, the sign of Jonah. He uses that phrase a couple of times, the sign of Jonah. The sign of Jonah is meant to foreshadow Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. It is meant to be kind of a pre-showing, a foreshadowing of what is about to happen in the life and ministry of Christ. And so he says this in Matthew 12:40, continuing the verse we read earlier. Just as Jonah was 3 days, 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days, 3 nights in the heart of the earth. We can miss the weight, the gravitas, the importance, the significance of the powerful, incredible message that we find in the book of Jonah when we reduce it or trivialize it to just a moral allegory, a tall tale, a children's story. It is not. In fact, Jesus would say, you need to read and understand this story to really get the full picture of what I did for you on the cross through death and resurrection. And so it points to something much, much bigger. As we walk through this story over the next several weeks, this is the important thing that we need to carry, that we need to understand. That the story of Jonah, the 4 chapters of this book, the story of his running away from God, his rebellion, his disobedience, the story of God chasing him unrelentingly, capturing him, and making sure that his plan is fulfilled through this unwilling prophet. This whole story, it really doesn't, the point is not really, the focus is not really Jonah. The focus of the story, the point of the story is not really a big fish or a whale or shark or whatever you believe it to be. The point of the story is not Nineveh. Really, the significance, the point, the message of the story has to do with not what Jonah did or didn't do for God, but what God does for Jonah. The focus of the story, like any story in the Bible, is Jesus. The Jesus Storybook Bible begins with one of my favorite quotes. Sally Lloyd-Jones writes, "Every story whispers his name." Cover to cover, the Bible is about one person. It's not a collection of religious heroes and villains that we're meant to emulate or steer clear from. It's not a list of principles and ideas and laws and rules and expectations. It is holistically, cover to cover, Old Testament concealed, New Testament revealed, a book about Jesus. He is the Word, He became flesh. This is meant to point us to, not to ourselves, not to aspirational humans, but to Jesus Himself. So the story of Jonah, you will see you in the story, hopefully. You will be able to relate to what's happening. But ultimately, the focus, the emphasis is meant to point us to Jesus. It's a story of God's heart in ours. The story of Jonah is a story of sin and grace. It's a story of desperation and deliverance. It's a story that reveals that while our sin reaches far, His love and grace reaches even further. This story is an illustration of the fact that God's capacity to clean and fix things is even bigger than our capacity to mess things up and break them. That He is actually faithful with that. And so I know that it is natural to read stories in the Bible and disassociate ourselves from the bad and associate ourselves with the good, to find the good qualities, the good people, the righteous people, and feel a kindred spirit with them, and then see the disobedient boneheads, and then we disassociate. We might even say, you know who needs to hear this? And start thinking of other names, other people who are equally boneheaded. Even when we read of David, which is a fascinating story that kind of threads through the Bible, and even through the Psalms, you can see his mentality, his heartbreak, his worship. When we read of David, those shining moments where he is the young man who kills Goliath, that kills the lion and the bear, and is protecting his father's flock, and he is a good underdog brother, and he rises to leadership. He is gracious and obedient even through the whole Saul story fiasco. That guy, we're like, yeah, I feel that. I can resonate with that. I can identify with that. I can vibe with that. And then when we hit the Bathsheba thing, we're like, oh, I know that guy, and that is not me. That is the rest of the world. So we can disassociate with what's bad and what's naughty, and associate with what's good. But as we see over the next couple weeks, I think we'll start to understand that the story of Jonah it serves as this mirror that God is graciously holding up to all of us. And it reveals the fact that every single one of us run. We all run. Every one of us runs. We're runners. This story always reminds me of one of my wife's favorite movies. My wife loves Julia Roberts. That's her favorite actress and loves Julia Roberts movies. And the movie that I'm thinking of right now stars Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. Not that one. I'll talk about that one in a minute. I'm gonna reference two of those today. Runaway Bride. You guys remember that one? So good. Runaway Bride is it's actually one of my favorite romantic comedies. It features very prevalently right in the middle of the movie my favorite song of all time, which is Never Entered My Mind by Miles Davis, and it's there on full display, and it just melts my heart every time. I love it. But it's a movie about a lady who keeps leaving grooms at the altar because she takes off running from every single ceremony that she's been a part of. And so she runs, and so she meets Richard Gere. They fall in love, and he thinks what so many people in this world think: I can fix her. And no, you cannot. So he thinks I can fix her, and so they're at the altar, and what do you know it? She runs out the church and jumps on a FedEx truck, and she's gone. And we discover why she runs, and the reason behind her running. I'm spoiling the movie from 1995 or whatever it was, 96. The reason she runs is because ultimately she has no clue who she is. the question starts arising, how do you like your eggs? And she mimics the people she's with. She takes her eggs the way that they do. She sort of just kind of mirrors everybody else. But she really didn't have a clear understanding of who and what she is herself. We all have the same problem. And we all run for the same reason, because we haven't really locked into who we are in Christ, our true identity. Funny story about that movie. I was in an antique shop. I was in Ellijay, I believe. I was out of town just having fun, walking through an antique shop. And I came across, I was looking through all these different things, and being the generous human being that I am, I'm always texting other people things that I find, because I'm always thinking about others before myself. And so I texted my dad about a record I'd found, and I said, do you have this one? And we were talking. And then I found this giant, oversized Runaway Bride poster, framed. And I took a picture, and I went to text Sonia and say, I'm going to get this for you. And I accidentally sent that to my dad. And I sent the picture of the big poster of Runaway Bride to my father and said, I'm going to get this for you. And then I realized what I did, dead silence. And then suddenly I was just like, I meant that to be to Sonia. And then all I get back is, I hope so. Not to embarrass him, my mom texted me the other day, and we were talking back and forth, and then I think she was texting Allie, who I announced last week. Josh and Allie are expecting, and they got a baby on the way, and congratulations to them. And Mom said something about getting maternity pants to me. She's like, she suggested something about maternity pants to me, and I said, what are you trying to say? Thanks, Mom. It's good for your confidence. So this story is about someone who runs and who's scared to commit, who can't commit and go all the way with the commitment that is put before him, and so he runs. And so he runs not because God's plan won't work. He knows it will. And his thought is, I refuse to bring the goodness of God to people who don't deserve it, to those pagan Ninevites. And we'll talk more about them next week. But this is our sworn enemies. We hate them. I don't know them personally, but generally the whole picture of I hate all those guys. And so he runs because he doesn't believe that they deserve God's righteousness, because they are so deeply unrighteous. And so he runs. There's another story about a runner that comes to mind, and that is the story of the prodigal son, who runs because he wants to do his thing. In the same way that Jonah wants to do his thing, the prodigal son wants to do his thing, and so he runs. But in the prodigal son story, you've got a guy who's running in his unrighteousness and his disobedience, running away from God. He would be sort of the Ninevites, who have run far from God in their unrighteousness, in their evil sin. Jonah is sort of like the older brother in the prodigal son story, who's also running from the father, but in his self-righteousness, in his sanctimoniousness, in his know-it-all-ism. Both people are running away. One running because of their sin and unrighteousness, one running because of their self-righteousness, but both are equally distant from the Father. So Jonah is a sanctimonious, self-righteous runner. Aren't we all? I used to read this story and think, man, what a moron. And now, by the grace of God, I read this story, I'm like, oh my God, that's me. I'm that guy. Either way, whether you're running from God in your sin, your unrighteousness, you're running from God in your self-righteousness, your know-it-allism, it all comes down to this idea. I'm trying to find freedom for myself. I got this one. I don't need any help. I'm going to do it. Man's attempt to be his own God. That is our flight from God. We want to do it. We're do-it-ourselfers. We're bootstrappers. I got this. I know better. I figured it out. I got it. Even though we run, we all do. We run from God. We'll run toward people, places, and things. We'll run towards ideals. We'll run towards ideology. We run towards camps of people that we feel that we could belong to, that they are also equally running from the cause of Christ, obedience to God. We will run as far as we can, seeking something that we already have. Even though we run, even though we run towards things that are smaller than Jesus to define us, to fulfill us, to bring meaning and purpose to our existence, even though we run in disobedience, God graciously chases us. God chases after us. There's a phrase that's used, I forgot the author that coined it, but called him the hound of heaven. The hound of heaven will chase us down. We are constantly being chased because that's how much God loves us. I was in a store the other day, and all of a sudden I see a child just running, and free of any sort of parental figure, just on the loose, a free-range child. And so he's just running around, and I'm just kind of watching him in front of me just run back and forth, just cause complete and total chaos. And then at the end of the aisle, I see Mom, finally. I was like, whose kid is this? And finally, Mom's running, trying to catch him. And she looks to every person that she can make eye contact with and apologizes. It's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, I don't care. It's not my kid. Who cares? In fact, I didn't say it out loud, but after she left, I was like, thank you for the sermon illustration, ma'am. We're all that kid. And there's someone what chases us is love. Mom was chasing the child because she loved that child. If she didn't love that child, she would have left him on his own. That reminds me of another story when my mom lost me in a store and basically left me there. She got me eventually, begrudgingly. Even though we run, we all run, God chases us. I think through the story, the power is in the reality that we run. The power of the story, the weight of the story, the impact of the story is seeing clearly that we do. Because it's easy to dismiss it again and say, I don't do that. We all do that. We're all disobedient in some way, shape, or form. We all ignore or don't listen to the prompting of God. We all kind of go our own way. We choose what we want to choose. My favorite thing, and I'm not being harsh, I'm just bringing it up. This is common. I've been in church my whole life. People will make up their minds emotionally, and then they'll say, well, I feel like God is leading me in that direction. And I'll look at it objectively, and I'm like, that's what you wanted. That's what you talked about. And now you're slapping the God sticker on it because that's what you want. Call it what it is. Let's just be honest. We're free to be honest. I want to do this, and I kind of don't care what God has to say about it. Can we be honest at Family Church? That's how it goes. People make up their minds emotionally, and then they start rationalizing intellectually and even spiritually. I cussed my coworker out the other day, but I think it was the prompting of the Holy Spirit. I said what needed to be said. I was a prophet, a vessel. Thus saith the Lord. Go get hit by a bus. He chases us. He chases us not because he's mad at us, but because he loves us. Now the other Julia Roberts, Richard Gere movie. Pretty woman walking down the street. I've never seen this movie because it's about horrible things. My wife's told me all about it. If you've never seen it, Julia Roberts does not play a confused bride in this. She plays a lady of the night. Richard Gere is one who employs, am I being aloof enough? He employs a lady of the night for a tenure of service. That sounds worse than it is, actually. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. So that movie is a story of a prostitute and one who basically rescues her and treats her like a person, a lady, one who's meant to be loved, worthy of dignity. Takes her shopping on Rodeo Drive and gets her cleaned up and presentable into a place where she feels more valued than one who is in prostitution would feel. It's sort of this modern, quasi-modern. It's like 1990, but it's a modern sort of telling of the the Gomer Hosea. That's their relationship. That's like Bennifer. It's like Homer and Gozea. Hosea and Gomer. And so it's a beautiful story of God basically loving Hosea so much that he said, I want you to get married. I want you to have a wife. And he's like, yes, that's a great idea. I'm hearing from God now. And then God says, the person I want you to marry is Gomer. And even the name, you're not going to see a Disney princess named Gomer. I can show you the world, Gomer. That's not an idealistic situation for Hosea. His reputation is about to get flushed down the toilet. And so you're asking a man of God, a prophet of God, to marry a prostitute. And the worst part is, he goes through with it. He's faithful. He's obedient. And the worst part is that old habits die hard, and he keeps waking up every morning to an empty bed because she keeps stepping out on him. And so what does he do? The first time that happened, I'd be like, God, I told you. This is on you. I'm out. But he faithfully kept chasing her, kept restoring her, kept bringing dignity back to her, forgiving her, would not let go. Till finally she's gone. And you think that's where the story ends because she's gone. There's no finding her. Until one day he's walking through the town square and he sees a familiar face on an auction block. She's being sold into slavery. And so what does he do? He goes home and liquidates everything that he owns so that he could pay the price to buy and purchase her freedom. This is a story not about a prophet and a prostitute. This is a story about Jesus and us, who, despite our good intentions, we constantly step out on our first love. We just do. We're broken, fractured, frail, fallen human beings. Now, that's not to diminish us in any way, shape, or form and make us feel lesser or lower. In fact, if nothing else, is to show you how deeply you're loved, how deeply you're valued, how important you are to Jesus. The fact that he would chase after us regardless of what has our affection, our attention, our obsession. No matter where our eyes are fixed, he's running after us because we're his. And he loves us that much. We didn't find God. He found us. We didn't choose him. He chose us. We don't chase him, as some would say. I'm following God. I'm pursuing God. I'm chasing after God. I love this quote from C.S. Lewis. He's got so many great ones, but this is one of my favorites. Modern people love talking about man's search for God. It's about as silly as talking about the mouse's search for the cat. There's a common conversation that comes up a lot about I'm searching for God, I'm trying to find God, I'm finding God in these things. It's like, listen, God finds us. God captures us. God rescues us. We are in deep underneath the lowest point imaginable. We're underneath that. God excavates and he rescues us. He resurrects dead people. Another quote from C.S. Lewis. He didn't come to make bad people into good people. He came to resurrect the dead, to make dead people live. He came to rescue us. So this conversation is about the reality that we all face. Now, we may not be swallowed by a big fish this week. I hope not. I pray that does not happen. I pray the worst thing that happens this week is that they didn't put the Polynesian sauce in your bag at Chick-fil-A and you drive off. You're like, ah. I pray that's the worst thing that happens. But God does chase us. We do run. And God continually is unrelenting with his love towards us. Even when we feel utterly and completely unlovable, he's on our heels, running after us. God's messenger, Jonah, is chased down, he's captured, and then many years later, God sends another messenger. This time, not a begrudging one who is more self-interested than he is interested in the call of God. It is a messenger who he himself would be called the Word because he himself is God's message. Many years later, after Jonah, we get a better messenger. And like Jonah, he would spend 3 days in total, utter darkness. But unlike Jonah, this messenger would arise from the darkness in order to unrelentingly pursue his enemies with his liberating message of unending and unfailing love from God. This is what I'll sum up this first message of the series and kind of our overview of the story of Jonah. I want to sum it up here, and we'll end here with this statement. The bad news is we're all like Jonah. The bad news is we are Jonah. And as we read this, I pray that we see this. But the good news is Matthew 12:41. Behold, something greater than Jonah is here. That Jesus is the true and better, greater Jonah. He is the message. He is the Word. He became flesh. He took on our Jonah-ness, became like Jonah, became like us in order to make us like him. So where we run, where we miss it, where we fail, this is not going to be a do better, try harder message. This is going to be thank God for Jesus message, who took our place, who has done for us what we could never do for ourselves. He is the person we need to be. He is the person that we aspire to be. He is that for us, in us, and through us. May our eyes turn to Jesus, and may we fix them on him who is the author and the finisher of our faith. I want to pray with you. If you would just bow your heads and close your eyes, I want to take one moment here and pray. We're going to receive the Lord's Supper in just a moment, and then I have just a couple announcements, and then we can go enjoy this beautiful day